All right. So we're going to start, and if people trickle in a little bit later, that's okay. All right. So welcome to the webinar on fun and engaging circle time in Kaleidoscope Play and Learn. This is Kimberly speaking. I am a family engagement specialist here at Child Care Resources based in Seattle, Washington, home base of the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn program. And I support and train our facilitators in the area. I also have an early learning background teaching in infant, toddler, and pre-K classrooms. And with me is my colleague, Nicole Flores.
Hi, I'm Nicole Flores, and I'm also a family engagement specialist. So along with Kim, I also support facilitators in King County, and happy to be here. Before my time with Child Care Resources, I was a former educator, and most recently directed a play-based preschool. And I was also a facilitator shortly. So thank you for coming and being here today.
So we really want this session to be pretty casual and laid back and in conversation with all of us about circle time and KPL. And feel free at any time to chime in, make a comment, or if you have a question, to unmute yourself when you do that, when you speak, and then to mute yourself again when you're done. The technology is really sensitive and kind of captured the background noise in the room that you're in. So we just want you to be aware of that. If you're not sharing something, just to keep yourself on mute, we'd really appreciate that. And if you prefer instead to send us a message or ask a question in the chat box, you can do that as well. On the menu bar, you should be able to see that chat box icon. If you don't, go ahead and click more and it'll pop up. And just some housekeeping things. We will send out these slides and a recording of the webinar after we finish. And so if you can't stay for the whole thing, or you want to watch this again or share it with a coworker of yours, you'll have access to that as well. All right. So this is a little outline of what we'll be talking about today. We will be going over some objectives, just some general goals that we have for this webinar, and then we'll transition to some general just reflection questions about circle time to get us started. And then we'll dive into some tips on how to facilitate circle time and what kinds of activities you could do during this time. And we'll cover some topics related to caregiver learning and leadership in the circle time context. And then we will have a discussion on how to approach circle time if you're doing it bilingually or multilingually. And we'll have some open discussion on challenging situations, which will really be a chance for you all to kind of bring up some areas that you may be wanting some help with, and having time for others to provide advice and get some feedback from Nicole and I. And then we'll wrap up with some last minute thoughts, some resources, and we'll end on some questions. And then we also just want to note that if you are in Washington State and King County specifically, this webinar does count as one of your ESK requirements. If you don't know what that is, no worries at all. That may not apply to you. And it looks like someone needs us to go back to the first slide really quick. This slide is just showing the menu bar that you should be seeing in the Zoom that you have opened. And then on the far left, if you need to unmute or mute yourself, you can click the microphone icon on the left. And then if you don't see the chat box icon, it may just be hidden or minimized. If you click more, you should be able to access the chat box. So hopefully that is good now. If you have any technical questions, just let us know. Okay, so here are our objectives. So basically, the goal here today is really just to provide a space for all of you to learn from one another, for me and Nicole to provide some information so that you feel good and more confident about leading circle time and have more knowledge in this area. This topic is something that we both come across a lot in our work in supporting facilitators. A lot of facilitators continue to want to improve in this area, leading circle time, and are constantly looking for new ideas. And so we thought it'd be nice to have this as general space to have this discussion. Nicole and I obviously have this background in KPL and we have ideas, but all of you also have really tremendous, valuable experience that we hope that you will share today during this session as well. So at the end of this webinar, if you leave feeling a little bit, more confident about leading circle time and maybe have like one or even like two ideas that you may want to try in your KPL group, then we would consider that a success.
So we'd like to start today with a question to all of you, and we'd like to know what you all think the purpose of circle time is and what the benefits are. And so again, Kim mentioned you can unmute yourself and speak, or you're welcome to choose to enter your answer into the chat box if you're more comfortable with that. And so we're just going to give everyone a minute or so to kind of think about this question, and please feel free to respond to us. Okay, we have one answer that says social connection and interaction. Absolutely. Circle time definitely provides a lot of opportunities for social connection and interaction with one another. School readiness. Absolutely.
I think some things I think about with the circle time is just fostering community and just bonding as a group during circle
building
time.
relationships.
Yes, building relationships.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
I think of a time for everyone to come together and to have opportunities to share things and to talk to one another, to have a space for that where everyone just comes together. I really like that idea. And it looks like someone else just chimed in and said languages. Yes, absolutely. Routine. Yes.
Kids learn from routine.
Yep. Anyone else have any thoughts? We'll give you another minute or so. A time of sharing and engaging and fun. Yes. Yes. Fun.
Playing and learning.
Playing and learning, building language, opportunities to gain important skills, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, math skills, just many, many possibilities of learning during circle time. Someone else just chimed in and said, observe others and learn from one another. Yes, yes. Sometimes that's the best part, just looking over at your neighbor and chatting with them and yeah, learning new ideas. Yep. I love this idea that, many people sing different songs to their children at home and know different songs and sometimes know the same songs in different languages. So being able to share those ideas with participants and one another is just really fun during circle time. Anyone else like to chime in? you have any other comments, Kim? No? Okay. Oh. There we go. We created this word cloud of, it just has many words that we felt that are related to circle time. Joy, books, building, community, relationships, songs together, building together, facilitators. And so we just wanted to share this with all of you. Okay, now we're gonna switch. We're gonna ask another question, and that is, what does a successful circle time look like as a facilitator? And what do you think a successful circle time looks like from a caregiver's point of view? We would love to get your feedback on this.
And the reason why we're asking about the facilitator's perspective, as well as the caregiver's perspective, is because what you may think of as the most perfect, successful circle time, that may be different for a caregiver or from like the child's perspective, even too.
Right. That's a good point about a child. Yeah.
And it's possible by the end of this webinar, your definition of a successful circle time may look very different.
Yeah. So as a facilitator, while you're thinking about this, think about a time that you just felt like you just had a wonderful circle time. You felt like it was successful. And what did that look like? I'm very curious. Okay, someone just chimed in and said, for a facilitator, everyone is participating. And from a caregiver's point of view, child is happy and having a good time. Yeah. Someone else chimed in and said, as a facilitator, children and caregiver participation and enjoyment. Yes. Because it needs to be fun. Yeah. Children learn when they're having fun. Anyone else? Kim and I thought a lot about this question when we did these slides, and we just wondered, we go to a lot of different sites and we see a lot of circle times, and they're all wonderful, but we love getting the facilitators' point of views and what they're feeling like and how they're feeling about their circle time, and just thinking of ways that we can support them so that they feel more confident when they're doing circle times. It looks like someone else just chimed in and said, as a facilitator, parents and caregivers really spend time playing with children and learn some new skills that they can use at home. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Very Kaleidoscope embedded.
Yeah. So I'll give you all another minute to kind of think about the question and to answer if you choose to. As a caregiver, someone just chimed in and said, as a caregiver, they have more topics to talk to children, common topics. Yeah.
That relates to caregiver learning, which we'll talk a lot about later on.
Yeah. Okay, next, Kim has a little short video that she'd like to show you. Do you want to say something about the video, Kim?
Yeah, so this is just a short clip of a classical play learn facilitator, and it's just a piece of her circle time. She's talking to the participants and reading a story, and we're gonna play it. We're gonna watch the whole clip. It's not very long. Hopefully the volume is okay with the audio. If you're having some trouble hearing it, that's okay. I think the main thing we all want you to do is just to watch the video and kind of notice what she's doing in the video, her movements, and looking at the participants and seeing what they're doing. And then after we finish watching it, we'll just have a small chat before diving into the next section.
What's that? What do you see out there? Is it kind of gloomy to Tony said?
I remember that one.
Is it raining? Yeah. So we're going to do a quick song about the rain and then read a book about what this house does in the rain. Can you get out your spiders? The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again. Good job! So this book starts in the rain, and let's see what happens. Maybe just like in our song, the sun will come out. There is a house, a napping house. Sit down, Guy. Where everyone is sleeping. Can you guys put your heads in your hands for me and go? I don't snore, but their daddy does, so I know what it sounds like. Yeah, daddy snores, right? Yeah. And in that house, there is a bed. People can't see if you guys are sitting up. Sit down. A cozy bed in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. What do we do? Good job. And on that bed, there is a granny. A snoring granny on a cozy bed in a napping house where everyone is sleeping.
All right. So hopefully that played well for you all. Something that we wanted to pose is, what did you notice in the video? Like, what did you notice the facilitator doing? What did you notice about the children / the participants? What stood out to you? What about you, Nicole? What did you notice?
I noticed that she used a lot of hand gestures
Yes.
to engage the children.
Yes.
And she's just being fun.
Yeah.
And she also seems like she has a calm demeanor.
Right.
Even though there is some stuff going on in the background.
It looks like she had like a finger play at one point with the itsy bitsy spider. And then when she was talking about the rain, she was kind of like mimicking the rain with her hands. Yeah. And you see when she's pretending to snore while she's reading the book, she's like pretending to do that and
asking everyone to participate.
Someone has asked if those are her own children. I'm not sure. So the way that video is angled, you can't see actually many of the caregivers in the room, but they're there though, so that some of the children kind of moved up closer. So they may be someone else's children, but the caregivers are just kind of sitting back outside of the
I did notice
the zone of the camera lens.
This time around, she said she did mention something about how their daddy does snore.
Oh,
that's what she said. So
that.
I think it's possible that there are her kids, but I'm not sure either.
Well, many facilitators are prior participants.
Yeah.
And so many do bring their own children. Someone had made a comment that the kids are allowed to move around. Yes, I was hoping someone would bring that up. So at one point, she did ask if they could sit down, but obviously a lot of the children don't feel like doing that, and they need to wiggle a little bit and move around, and she lets them do that. And yes, and someone has added that it's not age appropriate to ask to sit down the whole time, which is totally true. And we were going to talk more about that as well coming up on our next slides. That's something that we see and talk about quite a bit during circle time with the age range of the infant to 5 group that KPL serves, and what that means to like have movement activities, and what that means to ask people to always sit down quietly during the whole time. That may not be totally developmentally appropriate. Someone has said that the facilitator was engaging. Tone of voice was pleasant. She quote unquote rolled with the kids, didn't tell them off for moving around. Yeah, that's totally true. The intonation in her voice, the way she was reading the story, the way we read something to an adult would be different than when we read to children, right? So she was adjusting her voice for that, and she was going with the flow with the children, right? It's just really what circle time is about, just like being on your toes and adapting when you need to. Great, thank you, all of you. So, oh yeah, someone has added in also same eye level as the children.
Yeah.
Yes, she is down at their level. Just a huge thing when working with very young children, just getting down on their level with them. That's a really good observation as well. So these things that you all have brought up in your comments, definitely keep them at the forefront of your mind. And then also thinking about how you lead your circle time. Hopefully this has sparked some reflection on your behalf, because as we go through this webinar and talk about different topics, we'll definitely want you to keep in mind on what you're doing in your circle time and what things you may want to try that are new or adjust to see if it may work better for you and your group. So we're going to transition to kind of like our first main topic, and we're going to go over some tips on different types of activities that you can do and incorporate in your circle time. And one thing that we really encourage all of you to do is to think about what types of visuals you have during your circle time. And this is a photo of one of our Kaleidoscope Play and Learn facilitators here in Washington State who uses puppets during her circle time. Puppets, any type of prop in general, are really wonderful in accompanying songs, finger plays, and dance activities that you may use during your circle time. They don't necessarily have to be store-bought. We really encourage you to like hand make them if you are interested and have the capacity to, but not even just you making them, but also the children and caregivers making them as well. Yeah, and it could just be like a sock, like Nicole said, like
eyeballs.
a sock puppet. Yeah, it doesn't need to be super fancy at all. I think that the more the participants are engaged in creating the items used during circle time, the more invested and more excited they will be to interact with it during circle time. And aside from props and puppets, many groups also use felt boards. And basically, I have some photos on the next slide of what that looks like, but different cutouts of different animals and shapes and numbers and whatnot that are made out of felt that you can, stick on a felt board during circle time to use as a visual. If you don't have felt, that's totally fine too. You can use paper cutouts. If you don't have a felt board, you could use a wall in the room. It really is whatever you have available. And then just another fun item that we thought is a nice idea, a nice touch to have, is just dress up items, being goofy and being fun during circle time as a facilitator and putting on props and dressing up, or encouraging your caregivers to participate in activity and dressing up as well. So these are just some tips. This photo is from the Center for Human Services. The facilitator there does a wonderful job in using her felt board during circle time, and she sent me some photos of some of her props that she uses. During circle time, they often go over numbers and colors, and she uses the felt board to enhance like the songs that they sing so that the children have a visual during this time. And yeah, we just want to show you some real life examples of what some other facilitators are doing. And these types of materials can be easily found in many like craft stores and sometimes secondhand stores and whatnot. All right. So in addition to visuals, we also want to talk about moving. This kind of came up in the video we just watched about how the children were allowed to get up and move. This is a huge thing. We really want to make sure that the infants and toddlers and young kiddos have a chance to move and wiggle during circle time. Movement is a really large part of development, particularly during these early years. And later on, we have a resource slide with some resources, including an article about why movement is so important to development. So I really encourage you to read that later on. Someone has already mentioned expecting these little ones to sit quietly and still for so long isn't necessarily developmentally appropriate. Even adults have trouble sitting down for a long period of time. And so it's really hard to expect our very young children to do the same thing. So definitely give them chances to move around during the circle time and be creative about it. You can structure your circle time so that maybe you're dancing a little bit and then you have a short story, and then again after that you have some kind of movement activity. So it's broken up and varied so that they don't feel like they're in one place for too long. And some different ideas on how you can facilitate that. would be dancing with music, bubbles, like in this photo, scarves, music shakers, an activity cube. The activity cube is super popular. You can use a tissue box or hand make a little box that's kind of like a dice that you toss, and on each side you can draw or write a different activity that relates to movement. So for example, like spinning for 2 times or jumping 5 times and so on. So you could toss that dice or have a child toss it and see what it lands on and have the whole group do that. That's a really common activity as well. Something that comes up often, like moving and sitting during circle time, is that we want to make sure that facilitators know that they can let their caregivers know that if their child doesn't seem to want to sit down or is not interested, that's totally okay. Just let the caregivers know that there are other options that they can do. If they would rather like take a walk around the room or go on the other side and look at a book, that's totally fine. We understand that sometimes caregivers have some like stress or concerns when their child isn't sitting still for a certain amount of time. And if other children are, that can be kind of like nerve-wracking for them. They get a little bit worried about that. But children will sit down quietly on their own when they're ready to do so. And it's really just important to support caregivers through this and let them know that as like, adult caring for a child, all they need to do is encourage their child and just have a lot of patience with them. And again, it's totally normal for children to want to wiggle and move during this time. And just to be patient and understand that. These are just, some common things that we've seen during circle time for movement. If you have any other ideas at all, feel free to chime in as well. Do you have anything you want to add about just like movement and like?
I think also Kim kind of mentioned if children are not sitting and maybe wandering around the room with their caregiver, most of the time they're still listening with their ears to the story or to what's going on.
Yeah.
And just because they're not sitting that particular day doesn't mean that they will not come back next time and sit. So just keeping that in mind that they just might not be ready yet and maybe they're still getting acclimated to the group and to coming. So there are just lots of things that play a part in that. And like Kim mentioned, just being patient, and it's also a perfect time for caregiver learning to give resources to them on why children need movement and that it's okay that they're not sitting right now.
And I also add like, as a working adult who like goes to a lot of meetings and goes to a lot of trainings, right? Often when people start a meeting or a long training, we're told like, please like take care of yourself. Like if you need to get up and move during this, 3-hour meeting, please do so. And a lot of people do like sometimes stand up and stretch or stand in the back when they feel like they need to move a little bit. So, if we allow ourselves to do that, we need to make sure that children also have that option too.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about story time. And, when I'm thinking about circle time and, the time, the length of circle times, and when you choose to have them, I'm also thinking about just keeping in mind the energy of your participants when you're getting ready to do a circle time. Kind of gauging that will help you decide whether or not you're going to keep the same book that you chose for that day. Maybe the book that you decided to read was, is kind of wordy or kind of long. So having backup plans in case the participants are just not up for a long book, and maybe that means skipping the book that particular day and doing a movement song. So I just wanted to mention that and kind of checking in with them to see how they feel. And maybe circle time is shorter some days because there is a lot of wiggles. Kids want to get their wiggles out, so it might just be, what? Today we're not going to read a story. We're going to stand up. We're going to move around. We're going to sing some songs, and to be okay with that. So I would say just remember to be flexible and to have some backup plans. And I know that some of this comes with just having experience and doing it often. And the more you do it, the more it becomes a lot easier to think on your toes when you gauge the room and it just looks like no one is paying attention. And believe me, I know this feeling of when I first started teaching, and it was just really hard to conduct a circle time for me. And just as a person who had never done it before, besides in my practicum, and really having that nervous like feeling in the pit of my stomach that everyone is watching me and these children are not listening to me, and it just was really hard. But over time, I just realized that I have to go with the flow and kind of let go of everything that I planned and have a backup plan that, hey, today we're just going to sing, or maybe we're going to read a short story. Another thing I want to mention is screening books ahead of time. This should just be something that you all do with any book that you put in your group that's accessible to participants. Just making sure that they're appropriate books and for your participants, and then also knowing exactly what's coming next when you're reading a story to everyone. Larger books are always really fun. Children really respond well to big books with big pictures. And if you don't have access to these, you can also get them from the library. And oftentimes they have them as audiobooks, so that can be really fun too. The basket box approach. Talk to your participants about options that are available to them if they do have children that are having trouble sitting, but kind of talking about it before circle time starts. Letting everyone know like circle time is about to start in a few minutes, and then remind them, at the back of the room or over here on this side of the room, we have a basket with books. So if you feel like your child is just having a really hard time sitting, feel free to choose that instead and sit with your child and read a story to them. And so I think just allowing options is really great. And also, Kim and I kind of talked about this too when we were going over this webinar, is it's really, really about caregiver child relationship building, and the program is really for them. And so I think it's really great to even have a time at the end of the day for caregivers and children just to read together, having this quiet time at the end where books are available to them that they can choose and just read together. I think it's just a beautiful time for them. And maybe they're not reading a lot of books at home, or maybe they are, or maybe they don't have the selection that you have. So I just think that it's something they would really appreciate. Visuals and props, Kim kind of talked about this. Just having visuals and props and being really silly. The best way to get the attention of a child is to be silly. And I know that can be hard for some, but it's definitely, again, just something that the more you do, you just become more comfortable with it. And children just love silliness and over-exaggerating songs, changing your tone from up and down. And I just think it's a great way to grab their attention. And also keeping it short. Children's bodies are not equipped to be sitting for long periods of time. So it's great to keep your circle time short sometimes. If you feel like you can go a little longer and you choose to, that's fine. But just really keeping in mind what's developmentally appropriate for their age, especially because you all are serving so many different age groups in your group. And so sitting and standing, we kind of talked about that. If a child feels more comfortable standing during circle time, that's totally fine. Maybe their body needs to stand, and it's actually really, really great for children to stand. And so just kind of being flexible and being okay with that. Engaging caregivers during circle time. We get this a lot when we visit groups. That's like a really big question that facilitators have for us are, how do I engage caregivers during circle time? And so I think a really great way to start is to set the expectation and the tone before circle time, letting them know, today we're going to read Brown Bear, and we're going to do a song, and just to remind everyone that this is for caregivers and children, so please, everyone participate together. And also providing songs that require both caregiver and child to do things together. And Kim has a really great story about visiting a group, and she tells me about it all the time, and I think it's so cute. Just a couple of songs that she saw a facilitator doing that I'm gonna let her talk
They weren't songs, they were like, I don't know, like little activities. That the facilitator is actually here on the webinar, I think. So I visited a group locally, and this facilitator was really engaged and interested and just making sure the caregivers were participating. And a great way to do that, as Nicole said, is just having activities that require them to interact with the child. And so it was so simple. She had everyone stand up, and it was like a toast activity. So she had all the kids pretend to stand and be pieces of toast, pieces of bread. And then she asked the kids and the caregivers like what kind of snack they wanted and what they should put on their toast. And then everyone was like, jam. And so then the caregivers like took their arm and pretended to take a big scoop of like jam, and then they rubbed the jam on their child's tummy, like just like you make a piece of toast. And then the facilitator went, and what else should we put on our toast? And then they were like, honey. And then the facilitator was like, let's put honey on the toast. And then the caregivers took another big scoop of like, their pretend honey, and then rubbed their kids back and pretended to like put honey on the toast. And it was really cute. It was really simple. And it was so easy. It didn't cost anything. There's no prep time for it. And it was just a small little activity that encouraged the caregivers to interact and bond with their child. And this is just one example. There are a lot of other ways you could do this. I know a lot of groups, they sing songs like row, row, row your boat, and they have the children sit in their caregiver's lap and they row the boat together. There are other groups that practice counting to 5 by having the children sit in the caregiver's lap and pretend to be a rocket, and they blast off and they count to 5. There are so many little things that you could do during circle time like this that are so fun. And it is hard to get caregivers to be engaged, but when you make it easy and silly and fun like that, they're more apt to do it. And I would say, just be really encouraging. And there are some facilitators that don't really even continue a circle time until they see that caregivers are engaged. And it works. Like when you set that precedent, like, we're going to be a community and do this together. This isn't a ton to be on your phones or to be doing something else. It's for you and your child. Yeah.
Before we move on, I'm curious if any of you would like to share anything that you all are doing with engaging caregivers during circle time. If there's something you would like to share, we'd love to hear any ideas, and I'm sure everyone else would also appreciate hearing them. So if you'd like to, feel free to chime in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and speak. We'll give you all just a minute or so.
People like typing.
Yeah.
In this photo looks like they're doing yoga together during circle time.
So fun. Everyone looks happy.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, other fun ideas, transitions. So what's really great for transitions, bubbles. We talked about that, and we talk about that during our 101 a lot, is just engaging children with bubbles. Children love bubbles, and they love coming over to where bubbles are. So using that as fun, and flashlights, bells, harmonicas as a warning that, you have 5 more minutes or 3 more minutes before circle time or till the next transition. Having fidget toys available, squeeze balls, slinkies, little cars, those sorts of things. Sometimes a child really, they're happy to sit, some of them, as long as they have something in their hand to kind of keep them busy. And so having those things accessible is really great. Stickers are a really fun way to transition. And I see a lot of this at the end of the day when facilitators are done with circle time or they're getting ready to end circle time, everyone comes on over and they give them stickers or high fives or stamps. I've also seen facilitators do themes for their circle time. So if they're, listening to the interests of their participants and they hear that they're interested in elephants or farm animals, then they might sing a song about farm animals or read a book about farm animals because, again, they know that their participants are interested in something like that. Parachutes are always super fun. Um, you know, just a sheet is just as good as the parachute you see in the photo. Just grabbing a sheet or having someone bring a sheet and then just, moving it around with everyone, standing in a square or a circle and putting something in the middle and saying, let's see if we can keep it on. It's just so much fun to play with parachutes. Song cubes, Kim made a cube that everyone just loves at the 101. And this one's a little bit different because it has songs on it, but having different songs on each part of the cube and then throwing the cube and then deciding what song to sing and having participants throw them or children. Instruments are a really fun way to make circle time fun, and they don't have to be bought. You can make many things homemade. If you have a Pinterest page or even just Google like homemade instruments or recycled instruments, a ton of things will pop up of really easy ways to make them, and it is something that you could even do within your group if you're comfortable with that.
I'm just gonna pause and just say that if you have any questions so far, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we can always pause and answer them. So we've talked about kind of different types of activities and tips during circle time, visuals, movement, different transition ideas, story time, and so on. It's during this time where it is a great platform for caregiver learning. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that. Caregiver learning is a huge, huge part of KPL, and it is an essential activity that is required in every KPL session, particularly that children learn through play and that is delivered to caregivers. It's also an area that facilitators report often that they want to continue to work towards and strengthen. And so it's because of this, we just want to take some time to review what is caregiver learning, and then also just give some examples of like, how do you implement that during a circle time? So caregiver learning is when the facilitator incorporates opportunities for caregivers to learn about how children learn through play, about child development, how to care for the child in their care, school readiness, as well as other available resources and community supports. And this can be done one-on-one individually between the caregiver and facilitator. It can be done in a very small group setting, or it can be done in a larger group setting, such as circle time. And for just one moment, just go ahead and pause and think about your circle time and whether or not you use that time to incorporate caregiver learning. And if you're not right now, maybe you haven't thought about it, or maybe you have thought about it, but maybe there are some challenges that prevent you from doing it. Just take some time to reflect on that, but we can discuss this a little bit more. If you are thinking about this, and even before this webinar, about how to incorporate caregiver learning during circle time, we have a whole curriculum, many materials related to this topic, and hopefully you all are accessing these right now. If not, we will be sending them out in an email, in a follow-up email after this webinar. We have a caregiver learning handbook with descriptions and ideas on how to do this in general, incorporating caregiver learning into KPL, as well as another guide as well, lots of examples and photos of how to do this. And for right now, we'll just go through some basic examples to get started. Someone has asked, do we need to include a handout sheet for caregiver learning on each session? That's a great question. So no, not necessarily. Kaleidoscope is so flexible in its model where really it just depends on what is best for your participants. So actually, this actually fits really well with my next slide. So a good example of how caregiver learning can be implemented is, for example, like providing handwritten materials to caregivers. And for some groups, that works really well. Some participants really want just to take something physical home that they can study. For other groups, more like auditory learning and conversation and like oral lessons and talking and delivering that information through conversation is more comfortable for participants. It really just depends, I think, on the style of the facilitator and what your participants want. So I would just ask them what they prefer and what they like, or some people do like a combination of different things. But during circle time, you can pass out actual like written materials related to caregiver learning. And some facilitators have different materials that they have from the community. Some folks use our curriculum, they use the caregiver learning materials. So for example, you have all seen these those posters that say like, my child learns this when they are playing with Play-Doh, or my child learns this when they are playing with water, and so on like that. Some folks actually just print those out and hand them out during circle time. I've seen people do that a lot. Some facilitators don't print them out and hand it out, but they like read it beforehand and take those main messages and then deliver it verbally to the group during circle time. Other folks maybe just refer to like a resource table that they've replenished that day. And during circle time, they say, hey, like I just want to make an announcement that I've added some new pamphlets on child development on this table. Feel free to take a look at it if you'd like to. So that's one way to incorporate caregiver learning. Another way is to again, just in a verbal way, just to insert like 1 or 2 sentences at some point during circle time. And all it takes is like 1 sentence. And that could be related to how children learn through play and what the caregiver can do at home to promote growth. So for example, after you sing a song with the group, you could tell them, try singing the songs we enjoy at circle time when you are with your child at home. Singing helps with the language development. It supports them in learning new words. Very simple, but also like very impactful. And that might plant the seed into that caregiver's head. Like, oh, like today when we get home, maybe we'll sing, that song about the elephant today. And that can help with their language process. Another example would be, for instance, a lot of groups have scarves during their circle time, which is a great activity to do for movement. And after, the scarves are put away and they've been played with, you could let caregivers know, quote unquote, for example, do you know how when we practice naming colors, when we play with scarves at circle time, you can also find moments throughout the day to do this with your child when you're helping them pick out their clothes for the day, or when they're playing at the park and playing with leaves. You can ask them what colors they recognize. Again, just very simple, tied to circle time, tied to KPL, but making that bridge a connection to what they can do at home. Another example, I love this photo. These kids look like they're having so much fun. Again, with movement, you could let them know after you play a movement game or do some kind of movement activity, you can say, then jumping in movement games we play at circle time help promote gross motor skills and body awareness. That means that it helps your child develop their large muscles they need to move. They also learn how to think about their movements and think about how it impacts others. So that's another example. And this is the last example I have for you all. When we talk about caregiver learning, we also talk about modeling. The caregiver is the whole time during Kaleidoscope planning sessions and model and how they behave and how they act and their demeanor and what they say. And so for instance, if it's circle time and there's a child who maybe is having some challenges or is having a tantrum and the facilitator addresses that during circle time, they are modeling for the caregiver and how to respond to that kind of situation, and it becomes a learning moment. And in that space, everyone is watching and everyone's listening, and it's a really significant modeling moment, which happens often during circle time. So that concludes our caregiver learning section. Again, if you haven't already thought about including caregiver learning in your circle time, we definitely encourage you to think about it and maybe take some ideas that we just went through and to try them and see how they go. And if it doesn't work very well, maybe try to adapt it. If, saying a few sentences during circle time doesn't really work for your group, maybe printing out and handing out materials instead might be better. It just depends on the group, really. And related to caregiver learning is also caregiver leadership, which Nicole is going to talk about.
Yeah, so let's review what caregiver leadership is. Caregiver leadership is when a caregiver contributes to facilitating the KPL group. The facilitator is intentional about providing these opportunities for participation. So really, when we think about this, it's very empowering, for caregivers to be in those roles, and for a facilitator to provide those roles is just really wonderful opportunity for everyone. And also, putting a caregiver in those roles is also very helpful. If you as a facilitator can't come to group one day, you can ask a caregiver to help facilitate the group. It's really about bringing them in and giving them some ownership of the group, and finding out what they enjoy doing. They might enjoy playing music or singing songs or reading stories. So allowing them to bring those skills and giving them an opportunity to be involved. You all should have access to this, but we will also send this in a follow-up email. Kim created this document a while back, and it's a guide to caregiver leadership in Kaleidoscope Play and Learn. And it just has some really great key messages and information on caregiver leadership, why it's important. So please utilize these documents, and everyone will have access if they don't already by the end of or after the webinar. Some examples of incorporating caregiver leadership: ask or create a sign-up sheet system for caregivers to take turns on tasks like reading a story, leading a song, teaching a new dance or a game, blowing bubbles for transitions. Maybe there's someone who is always putting away the chairs or doing those sorts of things in your group. Co-facilitation really helps caregivers and other staffs feel comfortable. Build up to it, gradual. If the facilitator is ever sick or leaves, like I mentioned before, there's already a natural leader who's been doing it. And also have them do these things while you're there as often as possible to gain, for them to gain confidence and feel comfortable with this role. And it's just really fun too to have someone new do circle times and to do other things in the group. It's just a new face and a new person, and everyone does things differently. So it's a really nice role.
And I would also add that, like in Kaleidoscope Planning in general, a lot of facilitators are former participants who used to bring their children, or who would bring their children, now they're facilitators. And like that's a really like special and unique part of this program, and we really like foster that and want to encourage participants to take on leadership roles in their community and to be engaged in their children's learning and in the community. And participants who transition to becoming facilitators, which happens often, they're able to do that because the facilitator that was in their group gave them the opportunity to have caregiver leadership and foster that. And so if we're not providing caregivers opportunities and being intentional to take part in the group, those chances for them to be more involved, to maybe become a facilitator one day, they can't happen. Yeah. So we really encourage you to think about this and to inspire and energize your caregivers to be involved.
Yeah.
All right, so we thought it'd be really important to talk about bilingual and multilingual facilitation because a very large part of this program, mini groups, I mean, are led in another language, either bilingually or multilingually, or just in one language other than English. And this is really, I really enjoy this topic in Kaleidoscope because this really shows how flexible this model is and how it serves communities. Each group determines what it means for them to be bilingual or multilingual, and how the group is facilitated really just depends on the participants in that community and what they want and need. In general, though, there are such massive benefits involved with having a circle time led bilingually or multilingually, including maintaining home language, participants learning new languages, as well as a facilitator, and also just language exposure during these early years for young children and how that helps with their development. So for this, I was just kind of going to go over just some what we've seen in the field and how circle time is led bilingually and multilingually, so you have an idea of like what types of ways other groups are approaching this, and maybe you may come up with some new ideas. And if anyone here leads a group in another language, like their circle time, please feel free to chime in and add whatever comment or question that you have. So one approach to leading a group bilingually or multilingually or another language is that some facilitators, they only use the target language during circle time. So for example, if it's a Somali group and they only want to speak and use Somali during their circle time, they do that. Even if other parts of the KPL group may be in a different language or not, their circle time when they're together as a group and community is only in Somali, for example. Another approach is to do like a 50-50 approach. There are some groups that are bilingual where the facilitator during circle time, anything they say in Spanish, they will say in English. Everything, every sentence that's said, every song that's sung, every caregiver learning message that's delivered, it's all in both languages, 50-50. And then if it's not that, then the facilitator will probably take a combination approach. This is what I'm calling it. And this is where it gets really interesting. So there are many different ways that different groups do this. So one way would be, for example, the circle time is led completely in English, except the songs that are sang are in the target language, as well as there may be vocabulary related to like animals or numbers and colors that are taught in the target language. Like an English-speaking facilitator, also knowing Spanish, may also teach their participants how to count to 5 in Spanish, for example, and explain that in English. Another approach is the group is led in English, and the songs that are sang are in the languages of the participants. And that may not necessarily be the native language of the facilitator, but that's a way to honor the languages spoken in your group among your participants. Another method is that, again, is facilitated in English, but the story time is in English and the facilitator's language, which may not necessarily be the language of the participants, but the facilitator sharing his or her language is very meaningful, and it also exposes participants to a language they may not know. And then the last option listed is really the most kind of like organic fluid option, where a facilitator may use English and another language very fluidly and organically throughout the circle time without having this clear like 50-50, I'll say everything in both languages, I'll only do the story in one language. It's just more free and free-flowing. So these are different ways people approach circle time with bilingual, multilingual facilitation. I think in the end, what really matters is that you just find out what your community wants, what your participants want, what they want to get out of it, and aligning that with your own language skills as well. A few other items, we just want to talk about books for a second. Many groups have bilingual, multilingual books. The reality is that they are very hard to find sometimes, depending on the target language, and they can be very costly. So some ways to get around this is that some facilitators, even though the book is in English, they're translated as they're reading it into the target language. Some facilitators will actually write out the translations and gently tape them into the book to make it bilingual. Even though the book is in English, you don't have to speak English when you're going through the book. You can talk about the pictures and ask questions in the target language. And kind of just going with the flow and not having to rely on the English text per se, but just making it into the target language on your own. And then I also just want to add that from what we've seen in the field, we have seen children and caregivers learn a new language simply because the circle time at their KPL was in a different language. And that's really amazing. That's a huge success, I think, in Kaleidoscope. So I'm going to pause a moment because I feel like I just talked a lot. I know that there are some folks here who lead circle time in another language, and I just wanted to pause to give anyone space to share a tip or a story or insight on how to lead circle time by multilingually. And you know, if you have a English run circle time, hopefully you learned something about Kaleidoscope from the past 2 slides, because a lot of groups do operate in the many different methods I just explained. I don't think I see any messages in the chat box, so that seems like no one has questions, so that's good. So we talked a lot about language and tips for activities and caregiver learning and caregiver leadership. And even though we provide a lot of information and you all had really great feedback and comments, we still know that there are times when circle time can be very challenging. And so Nicole is going to lead the next discussion on that topic.
Okay, we wanted to know what is challenging about circle time for all of you. I think this is a great chance to kind of talk about this, and someone else that may be here might be experiencing the same challenges and may have some tips. So if you are experiencing some challenges that you would like to speak about or mention, please feel free to chime in, and we'll give you all a couple of minutes to kind of think about this question. I know that circle time is not always easy. There's definitely can be many challenges around it. So we'll give you all a couple of minutes to kind of think about it, and feel free to comment or mention a story about something challenging. Okay, it looks like we have someone that said transitions from playtime to snack time to circle time. Someone else chimed in and said, can we address some interventions for temper tantrums or meltdown as previously mentioned? Anyone else? Yeah, these are good answers. Parents not engaging and disconnected. Someone else just chimed in and mentioned that. We'll give it another minute or so. How to deal with a very big group in circle time. Yes, sometimes we visit groups that just have, I just can't believe how big their groups are. Yeah.
Over 50 people,
yes.
60, 70.
60, 70. Yes. Wide range of ages. Yep, that can be challenging because we're serving a wide range of ages. So how do we do that? You know, it's not like we just have 22-year-olds or 45-year-olds. It's very mixed, right? So we'll start with the top one, transitions from playtime to snack time, or transitions from playtime / snack time to circle time. And does anyone have any tips for any of these? Before we sort of chime in, does anyone have any tips for any of these answers or challenges that everyone put in the chat box? Or is anyone dealing with the same challenges? Okay, well, feel free to continue to chime in. Oh, somebody just said older children can be utilized to assist younger children. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's great to have so many different like age children together because I think that wonderful things happen. And you're right, there are opportunities for older children to assist younger, and they really like to do that. So we'll talk about transitions. So we did talk about different things that can be utilized for transitions. Um, Bubbles. So, you know, if you're trying to get children from playtime to circle time, also it's really important to have lots of like reminders. So if you have some sort of like gentle instrument or some kind of sound that you can play, and just to kind of tell everyone, you know, there's 10 more minutes to play. And then when it gets to 8 minutes, and then maybe like a 4 minute warning and 2 minutes, I used to do so many warnings, even down to like 30 seconds, 30 more seconds, because I think it's just continues to remind young children that we're going to be moving on, and these are this is the time that we're going to be moving on, because they really need those reminders. Children do not respond well to saying, okay, it's time to clean up right now without any warnings. I think sometimes it, you know, can give someone anxiety. Maybe not kids, but it does give some people, makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them feel like they just have to stop quickly and they didn't have any warning. So it's really great to give them some warnings. But also using like bubbles to bring them over, and maybe music, something else that's kind of fun to get them over to the area is really great. Let's see, someone else just chimed in and said dimming the lights with an audio cue like a chime or harmonica can be good for transitions. Yes. Um, I used to use a drum and in my class and in my group when I was a facilitator, but I started to feel like it was just too loud. And so I think that a harmonica is such a good idea, and kind of like dimming the lights a little bit if you can, or kind of like flickering them a little bit if you can, is just to get their attention to say, you know, we're going to transition. So those are really good ideas. Um, Addressing temper tantrums or meltdown.
Can I add something?
Yes,
Yeah, I just
please,
thought of something.
please.
I think sometimes children have difficulty transitioning from like child-directed play to like circle time, right? Because they're so sad they have to say bye to the toys, which is totally
Yeah.
understandable. So I think maybe like framing it as to like playtime has ended, you cannot do this anymore, we're moving on to the next thing. Just kind of framing it as like it's another activity. Like cleanup is like another fun activity. Like while you're singing like a really cute, happy like cleanup song, you can also make it like a game, you know,
So
like
fun.
if you have different stations and each station goes back into its own box, maybe like put some like red tape around the box, and it's a game to get all the blocks into the red box, you know, and all the stuffed animals into like the yellow box, and just engaging them and making it like a positive experience, and making cleanup time like, again, like play, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Instead of having it be like a, we have to put this away very quickly in 5 minutes and we have to take these away from you, just kind of shifting like the way it's viewed, and leaning into like the play concept as well. I think could help with some transition. Hopefully less tears will be shed during cleanup time.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Talking about temper tantrums or meltdowns, you know, those definitely happen in groups, and it's going to be a little bit different in every group how they're handled. But I think it's important to address how they're feeling and try to figure out what the situation is. I know that's really hard when you're doing a circle time. So maybe they don't want to sit, and that's why they're upset. And so I think like also having those options available to them if they don't want to sit, and mentioning it to the caregivers ahead of time so the caregivers don't feel as stressed out about now we have to sit and my child is like really upset and they're crying and they don't want to sit. Like, so making sure that you have options available. And then also just being, just talking to the caregiver and just acknowledging that their child is having a hard time and being patient. I think it's really important to maintain your patience when something like that happens. And because again, like we're modeling and during these situations, it can be really difficult, but trying to really maintain your patience. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Kim?
I guess I feel like people feel sensitive about like tantrums or difficult behavior because they may feel like um, that affects like their success of circle time, I think.
Mhm.
But I don't think that's the case at all. It's totally normal, and it's a really great learning opportunity for social emotional
Yeah.
development. Like you said, asking them how they feel and
Mhm.
why they feel the way they feel, and putting like a label like on their emotion and navigating them through that. So I think it's a very normal part of being a facilitator. Like everyone goes
Yeah.
through it. Everyone has a situation when a child is having, a hard time processing emotions and feelings.
Mhm.
And it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure people know that. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah. Also think like reading stories that address social emotional development, choosing a story like the next couple sessions or maybe next time just about like how's everyone feeling today and talking about the different feelings that children feel because again they're young and just really remembering that they have not been here that long and they're still trying to figure out how to maneuver these feelings and manage them and what it means and really how to like handle them. Like, what do I do when I'm upset? So kind of also talking to the caregiver afterwards and maybe giving them resources on, things that they can do at home. And if you don't have access to that, there's tons of information on NAEYC on this stuff. And we'll also send you that information at the end with the links. And then let's see, what's the next one? Parents not engaging and disconnected. Yeah, that's definitely something that Kim and I get often when we go visit groups. That is one of the big things that facilitators, ask us about, and how can we engage caregivers and children more. And so just, thinking about some of the things that we already talked about, like choosing songs that take a caregiver and child that they have to do together and really setting the tone before circle time. And also just for your group, making sure that everyone knows what the group is and what the purpose of it is. That it's not just a drop off and while a caregiver goes and sits on the couch or on the other part of the room, but really just informing them what KPL is all about. Wide range of ages, we kind of talked about that. I think with the wide range of ages too are really choosing books that are simple and short and not too wordy. If you do choose a book that's wordy, just being mindful about it. And if you feel like it's just long, kind of like choosing what pages to read and maybe making up the story yourself about the pages. Because again, we are serving children that are all different ages and it's better to choose like a shorter book than a longer book because the shorter one will appeal to everyone versus the longer book that will be harder for the younger ones to sit and listen to. Let's see. Sometimes I will tell kids, sorry, someone chimed in and said, sometimes I will tell kids that toys need to take a nap. Would you please help me put them in their room? Yeah, cute. It's so fun. Yeah. Like just what Kim said, like finding fun ways to get them to clean up. Because just saying clean up sometimes doesn't sound fun. And it does sound sad. Like, what if you're building a tower and now you have to put everything away and you worked on it the whole time? Yeah. So like also in those situations, if kids are building something, you can ask their caregiver like to take a photo of it if they're feeling really sad about knocking it down and putting things away, or if they've just created this beautiful anything, picture or whatever, and they want to continue working on it. Taking a picture of it and then taking it home and letting them know, you can work on this more later, but right now we're gonna clean it up and we're gonna move on to something else that's fun. So yeah. Anyone else have any ideas, tips, or Any other challenges that you'd like to discuss?
One thing I think which was odd about not engaged or disconnected caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
if it's like a technology thing, like if it's because they're on their phones, for
Mm-hmm.
example, which I think not all the time, but I think when this topic comes up, it is because of phone or cell phone usage. That's just another discussion of like what parameters or boundaries do you want to set in your group during Kaleidoscope. There are some groups that do allow phones and they're very relaxed about phone usage. There are some groups that do allow phones but ask you not to take pictures of
Mm-hmm.
folks during the group. And then there are some groups that have a strict no phone policy, and it's pretty consistent that that's implemented. And if the facilitator sees a caregiver hang on their phone, they'll approach them and ask them to put that away because we have 90 minutes together, and they'll ask them to, if it's an emergency, to take it outside. But until then, just to wait until after the group if they want to go online and read or something, but to engage with their child during that time. So again, if you decide what's best for your setting in your group, and be polite and friendly, but also firm in what you believe in and what you want your group to be. And,
Yeah.
it's hard sometimes.
It is hard.
It is. Yeah.
And I think with the cell phone usage too, because this is something that's come up pretty often with facilitators, is also if you do say that you're not comfortable with them using their phones, and you're saying it in a gentle kind of way, also having like some research to back up why, just available to them. You're not just going to hand it to them during that conversation, but having it at the table. That there's a couple of articles that comes to mind about the importance of children and adult interaction, and how important it is for adults to stay off of their phone when they're playing with their child. And so it's a really great article. Again, can you write that down, Kim? We can send that over if you'd like, because it's something that we hand out to many facilitators when we do visits, because this does come up often. And so we're happy to share that with you. I really wanted to put this in here because it's my absolute favorite quote, and it says, "Play gives children a chance to practice what they are learning." And it's just so true that children just need movement and play, and they really like to act things out and be silly, and it just builds. It's really the foundation, and they just learn so many skills from playing.
Persevere through the challenges of circle time. So you've all got it.
Yeah. We all feel it. Other thoughts are just you want to talk about is just how long circle time should be, where, when, how often. The length really depends on your participants and the way you want to structure it. But I would just say, keeping in mind that if you are expecting children to sit, just making sure that they're not sitting for a long amount of time. If they want to sit with their legs sticking out, that's fine. Or if they want to stand, just thinking about their needs as well is really important. And circle time can really be anywhere. You can be outside just in a circle holding hands singing a song, and that is considered a circle time. It doesn't have to be in a room, in a particular area. It can really be anywhere. And it really depends on your schedule and when you want to do circle times. I've seen groups do it when they arrive to group, they have circle time. Sometimes they have a couple of them. Sometimes at the end. I think I've seen a lot of them at the end. And so it really depends on what your participants' needs are and how you want to structure things. And again, how often just really depends on the way you want to structure things. This is an outdoor group that does circle time outside, and it looks like they have, I see some art, like some art materials, and they have a little blanket, and they just go out there and have their little circle time and get some fresh air. And it's just, you can have circle times anywhere, just any place where you want to bring people together.
Ooh, resources. So here are some resources that we talked about listed. The top, they are materials from our Kaleidoscope Play Learn curriculum, the handbook and the guides on caregiver learning and leadership, which we'll attach in an email out to you all. One of our affiliates also wanted us to share these really awesome websites. They're song banks. So if you go ahead and when you get the slides later in the email, go to these websites, and there are tons of example songs that have a lot of videos attached to them and how to sing them. And the people singing them also like, use different props and different visuals to enhance the song. And these are just great examples of what you can do in your groups. They're in English. There is also a section that has songs in other languages. So if you are facilitating your group in a different language, definitely check that out. And then the last link is a nice article on the importance of movement and moving one's body, especially for children, and how that leads to their development. And so we talked a lot about that today and how that is important to include in circle time, just letting the little ones move. And so if you're looking to dive more deep into that topic and learn more, or looking for more song ideas, definitely check these resources out. So we're gonna wrap up. We have less than 10 minutes left. We just wanted to pause and give you all the time to think about, you know, all the things that we had talked about. It's a lot of things, but really just reflect on the information that was covered in this session and what stuck with you. Is there something that in particular you were drawn to that you really want to try in your group? Maybe it's something that you learned that was completely new, or something that you kind of already knew, but something that was mentioned in this webinar kind of enhanced it. And we would love if some folks want to share, but if not, at the least, just think about that. And then we also want to encourage you all to visit other groups. Please visit other groups, see different facilitation styles, see other ways that other facilitators are leading their circle times, because everyone does it very differently. Even though there are like similar elements to it, the songs, the transitions, the activities, just the little things, they're all very different.
I think it's very inspirational.
It is
to see other groups. Yeah.
It really is. So I'll just give people another minute to comment on anything that we learned that was new from this webinar. Yes, the PowerPoint will be available for review. So we'll email the slides out in PDF format after this webinar. You'll get an email from us. We're glad that you're excited to look at the slides again. Yes. So and if you're not interested in looking at the slides again, want to rewatch the webinar, you also have the recording as well. And also just want to note that all of these photos in the PowerPoint are from actual Kaleidoscope Play Learn groups.
Yeah.
So we just, we wanted to include the participants and the facilitators in this presentation. Okay, so if no one has anything else to add, if you have any final questions, now will be the time to ask them as we're wrapping up. And if you come up with a question later on, feel free to contact us if you think of something. No worries.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, great. So we're just getting some messages about how the information in this session was really useful. We're really happy to hear that. Thank you for your comment. And it looks like someone is trying to visit other groups in their area as well. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, please do. And if you can, when you visit a group, even visit a group that is, that would be different than your group. Like if you run like a Spanish English group, maybe try going to like a Chinese speaking group, or if you a group in like a more like rural location, if you're like in a more urban area. I don't know, just like try to mix it up a bit, because I think the more different it is, the more it will be learned.
And it's inspiring.
Yeah.
I wish I did not visit many groups before I became a facilitator, and I wish I had, because now that I'm in this position and Kim and I visit like many groups, I just see so many amazing things, and it's just really inspirational. And then you just get so many ideas, and it's really great for us because we can pass on ideas to other facilitators or challenges that we've seen people handle in different ways. So there's just so many good things about it, and just connecting with the facilitator, really just like building that relationship. And there's just something so special about just holding this position and someone else has it, just connecting with them and sharing ideas. It's just a really great idea.
All right.
I
love this
I
photo.
love this photo.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. We're down to the
Yes.
final last minutes.
Thank
We used up
you.
almost all of the time. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you for all the work that you do, honestly.
Yeah, we appreciate it so
Yes,
much.
yes. We do. And this is our contact information. And one other thing I want to add is that for the webinars, they are based on facilitator needs and suggestions. And so if there is any topic that you're interested in learning more about, please contact us and let us know, because we want this to be useful for all of you, and the topics that we discussed during the webinars come from you all, not from us. The one thing that is on the horizon for 2020, probably during the first half of the year, is a webinar on advocacy, and that will be useful for facilitators and those that supervise facilitators at the more program level about what advocacy is in general and why that's important in the community, but also in the context of Kaleidoscope Planner and expanding, and how advocacy can support that. And it's really exciting. We've done some of the exciting things in Washington State with advocacy in terms of procuring more funding at the state level. And so we want to share those stories with you and how we did that with caregivers and facilitators and children and families. So keep an eye out for that, Advocacy 2020. Other than that, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
we'll see you next time. Bye.